Well, welcome to Voices and Visionaries, the podcast featuring the female forces in sports media. I'm Kelly Burke, and joining me today is longtime CBS Sports Director Suzanne Smith, a trailblazer for women in production. Suzanne joined CBS Sports in 1983 and has risen through the ranks to now hold one of the distinctions of being the only female at any network to be directing NFL games. Suzanne, great to have you on. How are you?
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's great to see you on here and to connect with you. I know sports have been a common theme throughout your life, whether it was playing baseball against the boys growing up and hitting an inside the park home run against them, or becoming Temple's first volleyball scholarship athlete, where you also played softball. What inspired you to pursue a career in TV production?
So you're right, Kelly. I've had a passion for sports all my life, and I've been fortunate to have had, different avenues to explore that. When I was in high school, my uncle had a film commercial edit facility in New York City, and they did 30-second commercials. And I worked for him one summer. And I think, as I say, that's when I got the bug. And I just love, putting together and telling a story with sound and video and colors, and I learned how all that came together. Now, albeit that was just 30-second clips. So for me, I was fortunate to be able to combine my passion for sports and what became my love of TV and to put them together.
When you started your career at CBS Sports in 1983, there really was no roadmap whatsoever for women. What were some early defining moments that really forged who you are today?
Well, you're right about that. There was no roadmap, and while I started in 1983, to this day, I've still never had a female boss.
Really?
So,
wow. Oh my gosh.
If you can imagine. But I was very fortunate along the way that I worked with good people, people who cared about what we were doing and how we were doing it, and they didn't really care about what I looked like or what my gender was. Now, that said, certain people did, so I don't want to sugarcoat it too much, but I had a lot of mentors who looked at me and what I could do, helped me, taught me, trained me, and took advantage of what I could possibly bring to the broadcast. And I think, every time, I had two directors in particular, Joe Estetti and Larry Cavallina, and they really took me under their wing. And when you can find somebody to do that, it really makes all the difference. So I've been trying to do the same thing. I try to mentor as many people as possible. I definitely lean towards helping women more. But I don't ever want to discriminate, because although I was discriminated against in my career, I don't want to do the same. So I do what I can to help and teach and train people. And what happens is when you get an opportunity, you need to take advantage of that opportunity. And I had, people who gave me opportunities.
That's wonderful. Are you starting to see more women get interested in production jobs?
Yes. I think overall, and I'm not here to talk about society because that's not my world, but people are more accepting now of people in general. So in the TV sports business, it's definitely more open, and you look at people for what they can do and how they can bring things to the broadcast. And I think the old school way, the old guard, if you will, that doesn't exist anymore. And yes, I've been at CBS for years, but I know a lot of people at a lot of the networks and see a lot of things, and it really is equal opportunity now, which is great. And we need to keep doing that. One of the problems I see is there aren't a lot of women in production, at least at the upper level, because there was no pipeline for that. So now production assistants and ADs, female production assistants and ADs are coming through that path. So I think and hope, shortly and very quickly that there will be women producing and directing at the network level.
That's good to hear. How did you learn to speak up for yourself and advocate for yourself when most of the time especially starting off, you were the only woman in the production truck.
Yeah, it's difficult, and it was difficult. And again, I think what happens is you have to earn respect, and you have to earn the respect of the people in the truck. But what happened to me was I would have certain people, like one camera operator who was considered one of the best. Once he respected me, then he passed along the word to the other guys. And they're like, oh, okay, if Andy says she's pretty good and can do the job, well, maybe she is. And for better or worse, it snowballs to do that. But sometimes it's hard. You have to chip away. And it's difficult also. I mean, it's easy for me to sitting here now, many years later. But you really, really have to believe in yourself. And I made a lot of mistakes along the way. You have to learn from your mistakes and try not to lose your confidence. Know that you can do the job, work harder than anybody else, and continue to forge ahead. And if you do that, the people around you will eventually see what you're doing and will eventually look past any issues they may have. Because ultimately, everybody wants to do a good show. So if you're good at what you do and I'm good at what I do, it doesn't matter.
You talked about respect. Was there a moment where you felt like internally, I belong here, that you had earned that respect of everyone?
That's a very good question. I don't know that I've ever really thought about a specific day or time that happened. And I think for myself, for a long time, I did have a little self-doubt, even though I knew that I was doing the job well, and I knew I was doing what my peers were doing. I still had a little bit of that self-doubt. And Kelly, I think that wasn't the worst thing, because it pushed me to be a little bit more of a perfectionist and not to accept, mediocrity, to keep working hard. So I think I was harder on myself than the people around me. And I'll tell you one quick story. So I just started directing full time. And, again, I wasn't super confident about what I was doing, a little insecure, and I go and direct the game. And I think I did pretty good. And whatever. The next week I went and I, did another game. I think I did pretty good, but I wasn't sure. So I went to my boss's office, and I was a little nervous about going in to see him at the time. And I said to him, look, I want to know, how am I doing? And he looks at me and he looks down and picks up a piece of paper, and he looks up and he said, oh, I see next week you're doing the Michigan State game. And I said, yeah. He said, that's how you're doing. And his point was, if I wasn't doing the job, I would not be on the schedule that next week. That CBS Sports would not give me the responsibility of directing that game if I was not doing well. So I think sometimes we need to, step back and look at, where we are and what we're doing. But also don't get complacent to say, oh, I'm on the schedule next week, I must be doing good.
How often did you find yourself seeking feedback like that and getting the advice of people in positions above you? Because there's sort of sometimes that fine line between seeking that stuff out, but also you don't want to be bugging people because they have important jobs and they're busy too.
Right. Good question. I think maybe that might have been the last time. No, I've told I've given other people that lesson also, because people have come to me and had similar questions, and I said, if you couldn't do the job, you wouldn't be here. Believe me, there are a lot of people out there who can do that. So I think that helped my self-doubt after that. And I'm not the type who needs to have a pat on the back or whatever, although I try to do that often for my crew, because I think it's important. But I think after that, I probably didn't, seek that information.
We were talking off air before this, and you had mentioned about Galvanize, the organization that Laura Oakman started. You have also, Girls Night Productions is something that you have started a long time ago. How do we continue to get more women to pursue production jobs in particular?
Well, I think to start is exactly what you're doing. It seems to me from the little we talked again off camera is you're doing a lot of stuff. You're putting yourself out there, and you're not just talking about it. You're actually doing it, and you're doing stuff for yourself, and you're doing stuff for other people. And I think as long as we continue to work together and help one another and not be threatened by somebody else, and believe me, I would love for somebody in the seat next to me want to direct, and I will help them to do everything I can. So don't be threatened by what somebody else wants to do. If we continue to help one another, as simple as that sounds, I think that's the best path. And to listen to other people who've been there before. I'm fortunate that I've been around a long time, and I was just speaking to you about Andrea Joyce, who's been in the business forever. Leslie Visser. Hopefully everyone on this who's listening to this knows who she is. And
you better.
Right, you better. That's right. And, so Leslie and I, we talk about stuff all the time. And I think that's the other thing. So with my Girls Night group, one of the things I tried to do was to have everybody from interns and production assistants invited to these get-togethers to Billie Jean King and Leslie Visser. And when you're in a room with them, it can be intimidating. But Billie Jean didn't make it intimidating. She does always, go and talk to everybody and cares about them. Leslie Visser will sit down with you and she will talk to you and want to learn about you. Okay. So one of the pieces of advice they give people also is don't be afraid to reach out to somebody, even though you think they're in the Hall of Fame or, they've won these championships. Reach out to people.
It's interesting you say that because I've become pretty close with Leslie over the last couple of years. I would say we communicate at least once a month over email. She's hysterical. She's so funny. She's so warm. The energy she brings on the emails, and she has so much to say, so many great stories always. And she's somebody actually I'm supposed to talk to next week for the podcast.
Yeah, she's the best. And we were very fortunate at CBS Sports Network. We have a show called We Need to Talk, which I think you're probably familiar with it. And
yeah, absolutely.
The cast of women on that show, one is more impressive than the next. And the cast of women behind the scenes, the same thing, one is more impressive than the next. And the camaraderie on that show is unlike any show I've ever worked on before. But it didn't happen without the support, so we talk about women all the time, the support of, Sean McManus, who's, my boss, and David Burson, who's the president of CBS, and even Harold Bryan, who's our executive producer. They had to buy in to the show. And then you had to deliver. And once we did, we delivered. Well, when we got Leslie to be part of the show, I do remember at the beginning, they're like, oh, Leslie Visser, she's not going to want to be part of this. I'm like, are you kidding me? Yeah. She's going to lead the charge. Yeah. And Leslie has led the charge with that show. So she's all about, helping one another. And I think if people look at her example, you'll have more shows like We Need to Talk out there. You'll have more sideline people being successful like yourself out there. And you follow her example, I think things will be much better.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up that show because that was actually something I was going to ask about because you're the coordinating producer of it and the director of it. And why do you think that show in particular has had such staying power?
Well, yes, I'm the coordinating producer along with Emily Deutsch, who she's been in the business probably for a similar amount of time as I have been. She worked at ABC Sports for a while and is now at CBS Sports Network. So she brings a tremendous amount of experience as well. And I think one of the reasons this show is successful is because it's genuine. It's not a gimmick. It's not, oh, we just have women here. We don't do gimmicky things. And each and every person, either behind the scenes, in upper management or on the air, are passionate about what we're doing, and they care about what we're doing. And every time, like if you ask somebody, I mean, I could name anybody on the show, hey, how do you feel about doing this? How do you feel? Oh, great, and then they'll say, okay, I have this contact, or I know this person, or I had this experience. And so everybody's all in. And what we've tried to do on the show is to take advantage of what people's expertise are. So if, Tracy Wolfson is a sideline reporter for the NFL, we're not going to necessarily put her on when we have the swimming segment. We have Dara Torres, who's a multiple Olympic swimmer. And we're not going to put Dara on when we're talking about basketball because we have Lisa Leslie and Swin Cash. So the list goes on and on. With that said, all of the women can talk about everything and anything, but what we try and do is have people talk about their experiences, not just something that they read somewhere or, talk about something. So when you can speak, from the heart and speak from your experience, it makes it that much better. And we were talking about respect earlier. If you're at home watching these people, you say, oh, of course this person, I'm going to listen to what they're saying because they know what they're talking about because they've been there. They've been boots on the ground. They've had that experience. They're not just, talking from something they, heard from somebody else.
Yeah. You've been a part of some really full circle moments, especially in the NFL with Doug Flutie, with Peyton Manning. I've been told by a couple of your colleagues that even some prominent quarterbacks making their first NFL starts, but besides those two names, what are a few of those moments in those games that really stand out to you?
Well, I think it's a privilege to do what I do. And I'm very fortunate to have had such a long career. And then what happens is you were with somebody when they were in college, perhaps, and then into the pros, or like in the case of Peyton Manning, his first game, and then, some record-setting games. So each and every time I do a broadcast, whether it's college basketball or NFL or whatever it is, I look at it as being special. I really do. But some things are a little more special. And when you get the opportunity to do that, it's fun. It makes you feel good about it. But also there's pressure on it because when you have a special moment, you want to make sure that the broadcast is special as well. And, when people say, oh, like the Super Bowl is just another game, I don't believe that. No, it's bigger. But each week we do prepare for our NFL games like it is the Super Bowl, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So when you have the opportunity to do, I did directed Peyton's first game in the NFL, didn't really know he was going to become the superstar or legend, that he was. And then years later, when you get to do a record-setting game, it's fun.
Can you break down a little bit a typical NFL week? Obviously, we're in some weird times with COVID, so I'm sure there'll be some things that change. But if it was a typical normal season, what your lead up to a game looks like, the kinds of things that you're doing to get ready for Sunday?
Typically for an NFL game, during the week, you'll look at film of the teams that are playing that you have from their previous games. You go through all the clips, you talk to the PR directors. I'll talk to our analyst. I work with Trent Green now, who's my analyst, because he talks to the coordinators and the coaches. So you prepare as much as you can during the week. You get the press clippings from the teams. And one of the things for me as a director, what I try and do is to learn the numbers of the players. Mm. So when the announcer says the tackle was made by so-and-so, I can say to the camera operators, 95 red. Because you don't necessarily, know, you can see their numbers. You can't necessarily see them. So I'll study that. And then on Fridays, we would travel to the city and go to practice of the home team. And so all of this is going to change now with COVID, but we go to practice of the home team and then sit and meet with the head coach, the quarterback, usually 2 other offensive players and 2 defensive players. Sit and talk with them and the PR guys so you can get some insight as to what you're doing. On Saturdays, we go out to the TV trucks, make sure everything is, set where we need to be. Most of the stadiums I know, but every now and then we get to a new stadium or something. So I'll go into the stadium, Kelly, and I'll walk around and I'll look to see, okay, so here's where the banners are. Here's where the Ring of Honor is. Here's where the American flag is. Here's where the wind comes from this. So learn as much as I can about the stadium and the setup. Make sure we know where our cameras are going. Look at something. Maybe we want to move something here or there, type thing. And then we meet with the visiting team because they typically would fly in on Saturday afternoon. Same routine with them. Then our production crew, which is the producer, director, the associate producers, associate directors, and the talent and our spotters and statisticians. We have a big production meeting on Saturday night and go over everything from, we're going to use this graphic. So when this quarterback throws the record-breaking touchdown, we're going to make sure we have this graphic and what the word. So you could try to go over every detail because once you're live, there's no looking back. And as you know, it goes quickly. It goes really quickly. So the more you're prepared and the more everybody around you knows what's going on, the better the team is going to work together on Sunday. So we have that meeting, we put together our formats and so on and so forth. And then Sunday morning, early in the morning, we go into the trucks and rehearse everything and go over again every detail. Go through all the graphics again that we did the night before. Check the music, check the highlight packages we're doing. If we have something about a college player who did something on Saturday and we just got that highlighted, we'll look at that. So again, the more I know what we're putting on the air tape-wise, the better. When it's live, you don't really know how that's going to be. And the teams come out, they're warming up, and about 2 hours before, I'll sit down and have a camera meeting with all of our camera operators and go through with them what the plan is. So every area you try to get everybody in line for what you're going to broadcast. And then the game happens, and all the planning you do, you're laughing because you know what I'm talking about.
Totally.
Right. So typically what happens is we'll say, okay, after the opening kickoff, whatever team, gets the ball for the quarterback, we have a graphic that we're going to put in, and here's what we're going to do. So the opening kickoff happens, and boom, there's a fumble, and the other team has the ball. Now you have to reset. Like the graphics have to change, the tape has to change. Everything's got to change because your plan in one play, changed. Or the producer will say, okay, after this play, we're going to promote 60 minutes tonight. Okay. So, camera 8, after the play, we're going to have this shot, graphics, and so you get everything set up. The play happens, interception, boom, forget it. And now 60 minutes is out the window. Now you're in a different mode where you have this replay set up, that replay set up. The camera who was going to do the promo, I'm talking faster now because that's what happened. They need to get a shot of the coach on the sideline. So people know their assignments, but then when things change, everything changes. So that's a typical week. And then you fly home and do it all over again.
How do you embrace because as you alluded to, you have this plan for the game and there's a lot of times it gets sidelined or stuff happens. I think you worked a game several years ago where the players, when they were running on the field, something caught on fire.
Yes.
And so obviously the plan goes out the window at that point. How do you embrace those moments of uncertainty and chaos, I guess you could say?
Well, a lot of ways. So that game, it was a Rams game in St. Louis at the old stadium. And in all my days and all my years, I've never covered a fire on the field and had the game delayed for that. So that's when your experience comes into play. And everything you had done up to that moment in your life, quite frankly, and in your TV career, you now start to rely on making good decisions. And the faster you can make a good decision, the better you're going to be, because you have to have everybody around you reacting to that also. And most things by now I have been through it before, but that was a new one. And I thought that everybody handled it perfectly, including the coaches. Jamie Earl was our sideline reporter that day, and we're like, Jamie, we're not going to get Coach Fisher. And like, he was on the middle of the field, and you're not normally allowed to do that. And we're like, okay, check with the NFL. So you try to very quickly get stuff done. But you try and hurry, but not rush, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
because
totally.
you don't want to make the wrong decision, because that'll put wrong things in motion. So one time, a couple years ago, we were moments away from coming on the air, and the national anthem wasn't over yet. And normally we come on after the national anthem is over. And my associate director at the time, he was new, he was inexperienced, he was panicking. He panicked. He said, and I said to him, just count. Okay. Yeah. I said to him, stop talking, just count. Because I knew, like, I had a couple of tricks that, we could do and cover it, only because I'd been through it before. And then after the game, he talked to me, he said, well, why were you so calm? What did you need to do? I said, because when I was in your position, that happened to me also, so you learn from other people.
Yeah. I consulted with some of your sisters, so to say, that you work with, and everybody that I talked to agreed that you are everybody's favorite director. One of the people I talked to had this to say about you. She said, at games in the cold at Green Bay, she makes sure all of her cameramen and women have hot chocolate. She's smart, she's steady, and she's loyal. Another person I talked to said that you command respect. When you're working with all different levels of egos and positions, how have you cultivated that sense of togetherness with your crew?
I think we're all people first. Okay. Yes, I'm the TV director when we're out there, and yes, I'm in a leadership role. But I have, my entire life tried to treat people equally, including my dogs, who you might be hearing barking right now. And when I was growing up, my father taught me a great lesson, and basically to teach everybody to treat everyone from the cable puller to the CEO the same. So with that, if my camera operator is out in the cold and it's 0 degrees and it's freezing, to me, it's just human nature to make sure, they have heating pads, to make sure they have hot chocolate or whatever it is. So I guess I put people first. And I don't want to say I don't put the broadcast first, because it's my job to do the broadcast. But I think when you put people first, that then does result in the broadcast being better. But it's not something I ever really thought about. Those were very nice comments that you gave me. Thank you to you and those people for passing it along. It's just how I am. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. You talked about your prep during the season leading up to a Sunday game. What are the types of things you're doing right now when we're still a couple weeks out from the season actually starting to prepare for the broadcast?
Well, I think it's like anything. The more you know about what you're televising and broadcasting, the better you're going to be. So the more of an expert you are about, is that everything from where the camera position is, to the history of the quarterback, to the PR director, to the team, to what preseason was like for people. So you're constantly doing your research and homework, just like you have here. I mean, you've done a lot of homework on me, Kelly. Impressive.
Thank you. It's kind of my calling card. So
yeah. So you know exactly what I'm talking about. So if you're prepared going into something, you not only can handle the job, but you can make it better. If you're just average before the broadcast, you're going to be average during the broadcast. So the more you know, the better you can do it. So this year with COVID, everything is turned upside down. Everybody's doing things things differently. So our pre-meetings this year for the NFL, a lot of it has been on health and safety, which a year ago we wouldn't have spent the time doing that, but it is, of paramount importance that everybody is safe out there. So that's been another element preparing for the NFL this year.
There's a lot of young broadcasters right now that are facing a lot of uncertainty. They're not, the business right now, I don't want to say it's unstable, but there's a lot of unknowns because of everything going on with COVID. There's not a ton of jobs out there right now. There's been a lot of layoffs throughout our industry. What advice would you have for young broadcasters out there, both on camera, but more importantly, behind the scenes, about the kinds of things they should be doing right now to hopefully be in position that when the industry gets normalized a little bit again and we go back to some semblance of normal, they can be ready?
Right. Well, unfortunately, a lot of people are having trouble with work right now. It's not just exclusive to our business. One of the things that I tell directors, and this applies to, sideline reporters or producers or anybody, is know if there's a game on, or there could be an NBA game on tonight. Okay, think about if you were working that game. And sit in front of your television, and as a director, call the shots, call the cameras. Hey, camera one, get me a shot of the far side coach. Camera two, get me a shot of so-and-so on the bench. Ready one, take one. Ready two, take two. Just like you would do it. It's just like being an athlete, okay? Even if you can't play in the game, you're still training, okay? You're still doing your reps. You're still lifting. And then something happens, and they say, now let's go down to the reporter. In your living room, Kelly, stand up and say, now I'm with, so-and-so, and do the interview. Do it out loud, not just in your head. So give yourself the reps. And if you can't be out there right now and you can't be working, get prepared so when the opportunity does come knocking, you can do that. And so if I can divert to a story a little bit, I was thinking this when you asked me earlier.
Sure.
About getting opportunities. I was an associate director at CBS, associate producer, associate director, and I played volleyball in college, as you had mentioned. So we were televising the NCAA men's volleyball championships. And I was excited about it. And I was the associate director on it. So I watched the event from the previous year. And I thought to myself, wow, I don't think this is really the best way it should be done. So I went and I sat with one of my mentors, Joe Assetti, who was a director, and I said to him, Joe, what do you think? And I did a drawing, a map, and I said, I would put the cameras here. And he said, I think you're onto something. And, because I wasn't super confident, like who am I to say it's not being done right? So I go to my boss and I said to him, just so you know, I've experience in this sport. Here's how I think it should be covered. So basically, I thought it should be covered more like tennis than like basketball. And he said to me, okay, hotshot, you're going to direct. I'm like, no. You had a director assigned to it. They should still do it. And he said, nope. He said, you're going to do it. And it was a valuable lesson to be learned because I wasn't confident that I knew more than the director who was already assigned. I certainly wasn't confident that my mentor would even say it was a good idea, but I took a chance. I went to him. I took a chance. I went to my boss, and it was the first event that I ever directed. And when I went to the event, the same thing. It's just all about people helping people. There was a camera guy there, and he said, we've never done it this way before. And kind of giving me a hard time about it. I'm like, okay, because we really shouldn't do it this way. I'm like, okay, can we try it? And it was against me, and it was successful. The reverse of that part of the story is the first NFL game I ever directed. One of the camera operators who I'd known, for years, he came to me and did the exact opposite. He said, if you get in trouble, you don't know where to go, what to do, come to my camera. Don't worry, I'll be your bailout. And I just had such a relief because I thought, okay, now I know when I get in trouble, I can go to him. So I'm giving a couple stories all at once, but don't be afraid to be an advocate for yourself. If you think you know something, go and present it. Now, maybe you get the job, maybe you don't, but also your boss may look at you and say, oh, you had a good idea with that. And try to cultivate your relationships so that people who do have more experience will help you.
What's interesting about the volleyball story, an example you gave, is the fact that maybe something that everybody didn't consider at the time is you played volleyball. So you you had this different viewpoint than probably most of the guys that you worked with. I can't imagine a lot, if any of them played men's volleyball, maybe they did, but just to have that perspective of knowing how the inner workings of volleyball are.
No, they didn't, and I can't speak for others, especially at the time. I'm sure they were like, I don't want to do this volleyball event. They wanted to do the big games, and I was psyched to do it. Yeah. And one of my points of view was our coach, when we played, where he would have us sit and how he would have us watch the game so we could see how the game unfolded. And I'm like, you guys didn't have a camera in the end zone. You need to put a camera there. And then the camera from the side, the referee blocked him. Like, why? The referee's blocking every shot. Why don't you put the referee on the other side? Like, it seemed to make sense to me, as you're right, just because of my experience. So you call upon all your experiences when you put this stuff together. And I do believe as an athlete, it's definitely helped me in my job and in this business. All the lessons that you learn, it's really helped me, not just because I work in sports, but to help to where I've gotten to.
Suzanne, you've worked a lot of really huge sporting events, from the Super Bowl to the US Open to the Olympics to the Masters. What is still high on your radar to work, if anything?
That's a good question. Not to be like so Pollyanna, but I am so fortunate to have worked all of those events. I love one more than the next, and so I'm grateful and appreciative to that. And now I just forge ahead to what's ahead of me. So there's not really, I wouldn't say there's really anything that I haven't done that I would like to do.
Is there anything I haven't asked you that you would want women out there, or any of the listeners? I mean, because we actually do have male listeners too. So anything you would want people to know?
I think you've done a great job.
Thank you.
You've asked a lot of really good questions. You've done your homework. You've done your research. You listen. You're compassionate. You're kind. So I think people could take a couple lessons from you, as well as from me. And I mean that sincerely. So I think all of us, as they say, we're all in this together. We just keep trying to help one another. Keep working hard. I can tell that you work really hard, just by the research that you've done. So I applaud you for that. And know that there are people out there like me who have been around for a long time, and some of the other people we talked about. So rely on people, because none of us, myself included, got to where I am by myself. It's been a long list of people who have really helped me. And not just, I talked about like some of the big names, but everybody along the way. And I think is my theme of the day is if we continue to help one another, we can be successful. And that's how I got to where I am.
It's a great attitude, especially in our industry, to have. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. We're approaching your very, very busy time of year, so I appreciate you being so generous with your time. And thank you for being such a trailblazer and for all that you've done to lift women up in our industry and that you continue to do. I think it's amazing, the girls' night stuff that you talked about, working with Laura on what she's doing with Galvanize. I mean, that's also important. It's so refreshing to see someone like yourself who has been so successful in their career giving back in that way.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all you do. Thank you for all your listeners, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.